Welcome, everybody, to Entertainment in the XR Era. I'm Maggie Lane, and we're going to go down the line and introduce ourselves for something that is not Googleable.
Something that is not Googleable. I'm Greg Gewickey. I work with Warner Brothers in emerging technology, not Googleable. I used to work for Disney.
Why is that not Googleable?
You took that
I
off.
don't know.
Okay.
Rebecca Howard, formerly of Discovery, oversaw emerging platforms. Not Googleable as I have a blue merle cardigan corgi.
That was a good one.
Yeah.
I'm Chris Young. I lead the entertainment lab at Nickelodeon, and I'm not Chris Young, the country music star.
Hey, there you go. J.Lee, I'm a founder and creative director at Occupied VR in Canada, and I have a fear of public speaking.
Great.
Conquering my fears. Here
This
we
is
go.
going to be going well. Okay, so we're going to hop right to it. What film, TV show, or video game first inspired you on your chosen career path?
Well, I'm a musician, which is probably not Googleable.
What do you play?
So I play guitar and several other stringed instruments.
Do you shred? Are you good?
You know, I don't have the hubris to say yes.
All right, cool.
But I've always enjoyed the magic that comes together with a production. When you take something that is original that someone creates, but then you actually use all the technology to embellish it and make it a lot better. And so I think I don't have a specific television program or movie, but just seeing that art form, seeing how it's done is just amazing to me.
Awesome.
That's such an interesting question. The first. I don't know. I mean, I think probably the first Star Wars film, possibly something like that, to date myself.
Oh, you mean episode 1? That was really good.
Episode 1, yeah.
I'm just kidding, obviously.
But yeah, no. I mean, I think that everything. I think I've always kind of been drawn to new music formats and alternative music and live music, and throughout my whole life, and art and all those sorts of things I've always found incredibly inspiring. So it's interesting now, I think, in this kind of emerging platform space that it really is all kind of coming together, and you're able to use all those interests as it's using all of your senses. But that would be my answer.
I would say that not so much like a particular piece of content as much as having an Atari 2600 and a Commodore 64 and all the games that I could play on those machines, and being able to go to the arcade in the late 70s and early 80s and at the mall, and just having that whole experience around kind of IP and just inspired me to, and then I would say every 80s movie, every bad 80s comedy that I grew up watching endlessly on cable television.
Like what?
I was a big John Candy fan, so like any John Candy movie really inspired me.
Polka, when he was a polka artist.
What's that?
John Candy polka artist.
Oh,
that
yeah,
was
exactly.
great.
I'm going to go with Rebecca. So my first one would be Star Wars Return of the Jedi, because it was the first Star Wars that I got to go to a theater and see it, and the theater was like so packed. My mom came, my aunt came, and people were standing at the back, and I realized the audience participation in the movie really kind of made me understand what a movie can do for a crowd, and I thought that was really cool.
Did you have the toys?
I had all the toys, yeah.
Did you keep the toys?
No, my mom sold them
Yeah,
to
you
this
should've-
kid down the street for $1. I was so mad. I was like an adult.
They're only worth like $20,000 or $30,000
I know.
now, so that's good. Okay, so we're on a panel for XR. What the hell is XR, everybody? What's immersion? What's XR? What does that mean?
Well, I've been looking at this area ever since, the last 4 years for Warner Brothers, 4+. All the news when Oculus was acquired by Facebook, everybody woke up, maybe there's some money here. And it's almost comical to me to see the translation of meaning of terms between defining VR, and this is VR instead of back in the 90s when VRML and all the other, one of the various iterations of VR, but then going to AR And then I remember reading the Magic Leap articles where they, defined mixed reality. And then recently, people have put the X as lowercase x, like it's a math variable that you just plug in whatever you mean.
Okay.
Which I think that's probably the most useful for us right now. Or the capital X for extended reality, which some people like to coin.
Triple XR is a different thing, right?
Yes, indeed
Okay,
it
just
is.
making sure I'm on the right
Indeed
panel.
it is.
Okay,
so
good.
I think it's comical the way all this is developed.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably true. I mean, it's interesting. Even the word digital to me already seems really archaic. And we hear about like digital. Even you think about something like a digital team and then a linear team, or digital buyers and linear buyers. Like, it's already so outdated. And I think that virtual reality, augmented reality, whatever the next reality is. I like XR as just a blanket term that we can kind of put anything in that's going to come down the pike, because we don't know what it's going to be. And I think when we identify it as a certain thing like VR, AR, we put ourselves in a box. And these things are all kind of merging together and growing. So I think, to me, XR is a nice just sort of bucket for all these new mediums.
It's definitely like a good catch-all term to help define some of these areas that we've been trying to explore in terms of the creative and technical opportunities that have popped up around VR and AR. But I think our group in the entertainment lab really thinks about the future being rendered real time, and I feel like that's a really great way to define these spaces, because it's all foundational. Real-time technology is foundational to VR, to AR. XR is a combination of these things. So we really focus on just does it require kind of like a real-time renderer? If so, what is the means to view this this piece of entertainment, and then is there a way to kind of author once and then hit all these things? And to me, that kind of is what XR represents for me.
What do you mean real time? Are you talking about green screen and mixed reality? Are you talking about streaming?
It could be that. It could be streaming. It's real-time composited virtual cinema stuff where
Cool.
you're doing full body facial performance capture, kind of in a VR environment, real-time puppeted 2D, 3D animation, creating a linear content piece of content in a game engine that could be a piece of animation, but then reusing that kind of in a VR experience, and taking that VR experience and turning it into an AR experience. So I think it's about combining all those things for me.
I mean, I think everyone kind of nailed it. For me, when I saw the term XR for the first time, I was really happy, because it used to take me 15 minutes to explain what I do with AR, VR, and MR, and now I can just sort of bucket it all into one and just talk about for 5 minutes XR, kind of sort of encompasses everything. So it's kind of interesting to see what will come with that too,
Cool. So how do we make money?
That's a good question. Well, we at Warner Brothers try to take a step back and say, what does this medium, this whole broader umbrella of immersion allow us? And at the end of the day, people want our characters, our stories, and the environments. They want to be in the DC universe, or they want to be in the Harry Potter and Hogwarts. And so for us, we say it's a technology that allows us to give our consumers another chance to be in that environment. The technology should not get in the way. It should just make that more possible. So it's really a lot about creating experiences. I don't think about creating apps anymore. I really think about creating experiences. And hopefully there's a narrative, there's a story, there's an experience with a character, or deeper experience with a part of the story that makes it more come alive, whether it's at a retail, at a theme park, at a mall, or in your home, or in a theater.
Yeah, but who would win in a fight, Superman or Batman?
I don't know.
You really can't answer that? It's like Warner Brothers doesn't let you answer that? Or?
I don't know.
All right, just chatting. We'll get back to that.
They're both important.
They're both important. All right.
It's scale. I mean, for a bigger media company, it's scale that's needed in order to make to make any significant money. The way media companies look at revenue, it's very different, obviously, than a smaller company. I mean, making $10 million a year for a small business in a media company is failing. So how do you make, you have to really make a significant amount of money for a media company to want to really continue investing, I think, in these kinds of technologies. So to me, I think, the scale is the biggest piece of that. And again, right now, as we all know, with such a fractured ecosystem in VR, and then with AR, with some phones enabled and others not, it's gonna take a minute for us to get there. And then I'd say on top of it, from a tech perspective, the tech stacks at these media companies don't necessarily accommodate the distribution of these kinds of experiences yet. So even if we wanted to make them from a big media perspective and get them out to your audience, it's still very, very challenging. And so there's just a lot. It's like you're turning this big ship that's creaking, to turn and to be able to kind of put output to this level and scale that's needed. And then on the other side, you need the audience that's going to be grabbing it. So for me, it's scale.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, most of us, I'm sure, were around in the early days of mobile where, you could make money in theory and you could monetize by selling games, and getting billed to your cell phone bill. But it really wasn't until the Hero device, comes along in 2007 and a mainstream kind of mechanism to sell your apps via the App Store model. So, I think we're kind of in a similar situation right now in terms of direct-to-consumer opportunities. There's some great platforms, offering kind of, an opportunity to monetize, but it's certainly not, we don't have that Hero device yet. AR and VR really has not revealed that to us yet. But I think the most important thing for us as a media company is really understanding the technology, having the vocabulary around it, and the understanding of how to produce for it. And then along with that, just what are the kinds of new opportunities that exist in terms of the entertainment that we create. It's a whole new genre.
Cool.
For me, I mean, we start off as a small content creation company, and in the beginning, I sort of, realized early that we had to do service, in order to make money, in order to keep afloat. And so, a lot of people that were sort of, in the circle of making VR and getting into it, they were all like, oh, I got to make a game, I got to make this and stuff. And they really struggled really hard to sort of keep that afloat and try to make money off of it because it's due to sales. And that comes with the headsets and whatnot. So service, I mean, in the beginning was definitely the way that we made money. And now as there's a big switch and, what's going on in Asia and the tidal wave of the need for content, the company, our company now is starting to switch to creating their own intellectual property, which is then, like leveling up to make, your own kind of real money, and develop things that you as a team want to. So I feel that's how I...
Yeah, jumping off from that, how is the strategy for either buying or selling different when it's pre-existing branded IP versus original content, so new IP?
For me?
Yeah.
Well, if it's pre-existing IP, you really have to stay within the universe. I mean, in some of the cases, there's a whole body of material that kind of defines what is within and without of the bounds. So that becomes more of a narrower scope, and the question is, does it enhance the overall universe and the characters? If it's brand new IP and it's a brand new universe, it gives you a lot more latitude. Mm-hmm. So when we look at buying brand new IP, there's a whole different set of metrics that we would look at as compared to buying the idea of something to add to one of our existing IPs. So it's just a different mindset.
Cool.
Yeah, it's challenging with original IP, unfortunately, because I think that with original IP on platforms that are, on AR or let's just say on XR, to get someone to want to do that without the sort of promise of what it's going to deliver to them and taking a risk on something new is obviously a really big chasm versus something that we all recognize, whether or not you're building out like a larger cinematic universe and you're able then to recognize that and you want to get deeper within those characters. I don't think it means you can't launch original IP in a more traditional way and then potentially have these more derivative in these other formats. But to launch original in these formats, I think is really challenging in an ecosystem where people don't even know what it is yet. So you're asking them to do two things that they don't know about. One, try something they haven't done before. Watch some content they have no idea what it is. So we're in a challenging situation right now, I think, in the original IP space.
Yeah, I would say also, original or existing, it has to be good. And I think there is this kind of, moment when these new technologies arrive and I can relate back to when I was a kid and there was we got our first VHS machine and I could go to the video store and there was just some really weird obscure movie next to a big theatrical release that was just put out. And, because there was only so many things, I rented everything, right? And I think that, that we've seen that in these early days of these new platforms where people are just, there's not much stuff out there, so I'm gonna go get it all. But then as the market starts to, mature and the floodgates open up, it's really hard to have your original piece of IP kind of, win out against existing stuff. And that's where if it's good, it doesn't matter. Like if you create an original piece of IP, and I think you can have your Angry Birds moment in VR, AR, XR I think for a while longer until you're just up against a crush of other original stuff.
Why are those birds so angry?
They've made a lot of money at this point. I don't know why.
What's funny though, is it a Danish company? Is that it?
I'm not sure. I believe.
I'm trying to remember. Icelandic? I think it's Iceland. Oh, okay. Thanks.
But it's interesting because even to your point about the idea of DVDs and being in a DVD store, I mean, there used to be the movie business used to be, they made. I mean, better than I do, but I know like the amount of films that the studios are making now is so much less than it was in the years where we had DVDs. So many films were made for direct to DVD, and they still made a lot of money. And now they can't make those bets because they don't have those windows to monetize. So there's less content on the shelves in terms of theatrical. So it's kind of interesting in that way because then you have even the smaller group of IP to pull from, which is why now we have these huge franchises that are
got to go
making all
back
the
to
bets.
what you know is already have
Right.
the marketing's already built in.
Yeah.
But I think to some degree it plays into this XR, this immersive world where you have a longer duration when you're in the technology. So episodic, little snippets of story that you would kind of almost wait for release actually seems to be a possible good kind of style of
Like
content for
bridge
this.
content, like
Yeah.
bridge content kind of? Yeah.
What do you mean by bridge content?
Well, I think about bridge content as just either an upcoming film that might be coming out or in between the sequel, the original and the
Bridge
sequel,
sequels, yeah,
that you're
bridge.
able to kind of keep people, whet their appetites, keep
Right.
them in that world and keep giving them more of it. And I think
Yeah,
that's
you
what
don't-
early web series were supposed to be, but I'm not sure.
They were,
as
yeah.
well.
I think sometimes you have to be careful to avoid seeming like you're doing the backstory, the enhanced content, the bonus content, the behind the scenes, because then you narrow the scope. So it has to have some relevance. It has to have enough relevance to be that bridge content. But also episodic, the things that some of the other studios have done, like Mr. Robot and in immersive, it really enhanced the episodic that was on television. So those kind of models are interesting for this technology.
And I guess, or straight to DVD, is that still happening?
Yeah, direct to DVD.
Okay, is
So
that
small, though.
happening in America? Okay, where are these DVDs? Sorry, I guess I'm just not seeing them. So, but is it more like streaming
Streaming.
platforms? It's streaming, right?
No, it's not. There's
There's Target and
yeah,
all
Target.
that.
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
okay.
disc. It's still disc-based. It's physical.
Redbox.
Well, that's a rental model.
Oh, yeah,
This is-
okay,
The
that's
direct to
true.
DVD is for sales.
You
But
just buy
that
them.
home entertainment department, it just went from being such a huge revenue driver
Yeah,
for
totally.
a studio. Now it's a very
Yeah.
small
Yeah.
amount.
Very
There's only one
interesting.
Blockbuster left, and it's in Alaska, apparently.
Blockbuster's not. Yeah, it doesn't-
There's one.
There's one left, right, in Alaska?
Yeah, there's one in
That's
Alaska.
really good. Thank God for Alaska. You didn't get an answer.
What was the question again?
How do we make money? No.
Original
IP
We
versus.
kicked it off with
yeah.
the IP
Yeah.
question about
Original IP versus.
You do versus branded. You do both.
Yeah, I think I do both. I mean, I think that the more that these platforms, I mean, if you take Netflix and the way it sort of started its its brand and platform off with just pre-existing movies, and then now you go on there and there's like almost there's a huge percentage of it which is Netflix created.
200 new shows this year.
Yeah, 200 new shows. So I mean, the need for people wanting to have new IPs to look at, it's just a matter of where do they go to get it, right? And I mean, what's happening in Asia, which I find really interesting. Over here, it's like, people are like, oh, I need to make content, or, like, how do I make content? In Asia, and a little bit in Europe, now that, like, they just tell them, the people that provide you your television, they're actually giving you, and your internet, they're giving you your modem with a headset. Yeah, that's actually happening. So, they're starting it off first, but, so you get your modem, you get your headset, and then they have their, like, Netflix of VR, or and that will then advance to hopefully other XRs. But they're desperate need for content, So in terms of creating content and creating original IP, I think that we'll find our way to do that the same way that Netflix did, as as these things sort of pop up and become in our house and just like a household thing that we normally do.
Well, then how do we talk to each other?
We're not really talking to each other right now anyway.
But how do we make it so we are? If we have a need for content, we people making content, what's going to connect those two groups?
I mean, going back to the old, like when I used to watch television, by myself on a couch, I used to enjoy the subconscious knowledge that I knew that other people were watching it, right? So I think that like if it's something in my house and like other people are, I know other people have the same modem or doing it, they're doing it, then it sort of starts giving us conversation to have, the next day when we see each other. I think that's maybe a good way to start talking. I mean, also like, multiplayer games and stuff are really starting to emerge, which I think is great. I remember the first multiplayer I played was like this gun game, and I got on there, and there was like 10 kids just sort of shit-talking me, and I was like, this is a lot of fun. This is like the next level, and we sort of had this communication that I didn't have prior when playing games in VR,
I think that kind of tees up in this medium of XR the opportunity for multiplayer simultaneous, where we're in the same game or we're in the same venue, similar to the way Pokemon Go appealed to that
Got
to
it.
people. So I think the idea that we're doing something together, even if we're not in the same physical location or if we're nearby, is attractive for this medium.
You mean like a Fortnite, but for VR? And that is in VR chat with Knuckles everywhere. Although, have you tried VR chat? It's kind of fun.
Yeah, I've tried them all. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
okay.
funny because the first thing that we did, of substance in VR at Nickelodeon was based on a prototype I had built around kind of cooperative network play. We had gotten some Oculus motion controllers, and we networked a couple machines together, and we enabled some silly physics. And suddenly we were playing, and that was the big moment where I was like, oh, it's a social platform, and it's super fun to be doing this with somebody else. And we were playing, and our mission is as a company is to make the world a more playful place. So it kind of really lined up nicely for us, and kind of inspired then what it was that we were going to create, which ultimately is a kind of little miniature Nick metaverse where kids or families can come in there together, play and watch cartoons, or they can create art. There's little mini games, and then best of all, they run around with like slime blasters and kind of troll each other with slime. So it is a great social opportunity as a platform.
I think some of the startups that are out here at this conference are talking about player versus player and multiplayer and synchronicity and persistence in that shared environment. And I think that opens up, even though we're still walking around holding a phone, I mean, that plays well to a future that says when we can afford to have glasses that are comfortable and look good and work well, that kind of inclusive game environment has an opportunity for a social gameplay.
It was great to walk the floor and see. I mean, I have a sense of the AR market and the kind of glasses technology, but when you come to a conference like this and you see it all in one place, and you see, every bespoke version of some sort of hardware that you put on your face, you just go, oh yeah, it's inevitable. It's like, it's early days. It's kind of, the form factor is kind of not that appealing and probably doesn't function as I would imagine it's going to one day, but it's really encouraging, I think, when you come to these places and you see the commitment that people are putting into this. It's inevitable.
Totally.
Coming back to one question you asked that I answered but didn't answer was on monetization. Location-based entertainment provides an interesting, what the Void's doing, what the Dreamscape company Spaces, people like that are doing is really interesting, because there is a high enough quality of content and a high enough quality of experience that people will pay a ticket price and have a fun experience. It may be short in duration, but I think it paves the way for people to realize, if done right, this can be a very fun and immersive experience.
Yeah, how bullish is Warner Brothers on LBE?
I don't like to qualify. I think we're hopeful.
Okay.
We're hopeful. I mean, when we looked at it several years ago, there was always the classic questions of, can you get sufficient throughput for the business case to be good? And what about hygiene? Are people going to be afraid of putting something on that someone else wore? So those problems are slowly, being addressed. So being bullish, I'm excited for the opportunity, but we've still got to get through some of those logistical challenges.
How do you solve the hygiene issue?
Well, I mean,
Just the face mask?
there's sometimes these throwaway little
Yeah, I've
rings
seen
that you've
those.
seen. I don't know if other people have seen other things, but just you need to give people a confidence that it's a safe and fun environment to
Or not just hygiene, safety. I mean, I've seen
Sure.
people afraid of putting on headsets
Yeah.
that might hurt their brains.
Sure.
We're really interested in location-based VR. It's how we entered the market. with IMAX at their VR centers. And we also were an early investor in Dreamscape Immersive and are doing an original title with them right now.
Cool.
But we've seen that model pop up as a great opportunity for us to kind of focus on just kind of the high-end, fully immersive, tetherless 6 degrees of freedom, and if not more, with all the kind of haptics that you get in terms of the immersion. And we really think that's a great area for us to kind of focus in on.
It plays back to what we were talking about, what I mentioned before about just giving our audiences more time with the characters, the universe, the stories, whether it's a behind-the-scenes deeper or it's a part of the universe you didn't see because it wasn't, in the foreground of the feature film, for instance.
And the Dreamscape model is interesting because of their, AMC is invested in them, I think, and so when you go to the movies, there's a Dreamscape right there at the movies. So if you look at it that way, we're just trying to get people to go to the movies, really, right? Because the people aren't going to the movies anymore. So it's an interesting sort of partnership, which is that you kind of eventize your movie-going experience.
And I would also just add, as a creator, it's like a whole new opportunity to define what that experience is. The tool set alone is a whole new bag of tricks, but then, when you talk about throughput and kind of that, shared experience and just trying to, devise what the thing is that you're making with a bunch of people that are used to traditionally kind of approaching entertainment, content development. It's been a really interesting process to try to unlock those things. So
yeah. And in those spaces where you have some 4D effects, you have some, you can do a lot with audio. There's some aha magic moments that if you just do the right combination of things, it just makes you feel so much more in that experience than sitting in a theater watching it. So
what are some aha magic moments? Like what? Like
Well, in the Dreamscape Alien Zoo, for me, when I went through that, it was reaching out and touching the head of one of the characters. That was just amazing to me. I don't know if
yeah, and I would echo that, in the Void, Star Wars experience, you put that thing on and you see other stormtroopers standing right there where your friends were. That's pretty amazing.
pretty cool.
And they had me at that.
And even with Star Wars, the heat that you feel, and like the actual space travel, all of that is it's really phenomenal.
Yeah.
Darth
But it's
Vader
been fun
was a little short, I thought.
It's been fun to author for that. We built a virtual stage specifically to do multiplayer free roaming VR development. And so all the technology that goes into all the gear, all the kind of backpacks and ridiculous setups that we've been working through and manufacturing our own active tracking mechanisms to have full body presence in these experiences and thinking about what that even is, like who are you in this story, especially if it's a relatively known piece of IP and suddenly you're a part of this story. How do you participate? It brings up lots of interesting conversations.
Yeah, I think with things like inside-out tracking as well, it's going to also allow smaller communities to start developing sort of these sort of ideas like Ghostbusters and Star Wars and the ability to walk around and see each other because it doesn't require as many sensors and things like that in order to be in there and it's tetherless as well.
And what about home use? So, the Oculus Go release recently is a huge moment. I see it as a huge moment. And we're going to have more portable, higher-ish end headsets coming out. How do you see that affecting what you guys do?
Well, I'm always answering first, so let me.
Price point, I think, is a big thing.
Okay.
Also, the fact that with some of these new headsets that are coming out, you don't require a big computer, and it's tetherless, so it's easier to bring around and show other people and spread the word that way. So I think those are two main factors that are definitely going to help the community grow.
Yeah, I would say that the Go and the Mirage, the Solo, they're really encouraging, and for the price point, the amount of technology you're getting packed into those devices, it's hard because you're thinking maybe a little further along down the technology road, and the limited kind of 6 degrees of freedom that you get out of that device, you kind of want it to be more, but you can just, it is all about inside out tracking and having these kind of standalone devices with more horsepower built in.
It's nice not to have a cell phone. And
Yeah.
to burn your cell phone up doing VR and then want to go make a phone call.
Yeah.
I think the tricky part, from a media company perspective, is that you launch your app on Oculus, you launch or on Gear, and then you launch it on Rift, and then the idea is that it ports over automatically. It's adaptive to Go, and it actually, it's not that easy. You have to go back in, you might have to make some changes. You've got your tech team working on that. So the days of, we used to bitch just about having an iOS and Android, 2 platforms, like, why can't it just be one? And now in VR, we've got, 6, 7 MR, so it's so challenging in a world where we're trying to get, people to come and eat, the squirrels to come eat out of your hand, but you're making it so tricky to understand where to go to it, and then you have to provide for it. So yes, I'm also really excited about Go and for all the same reasons everyone else said, but I also look at it as from a developer perspective, content distribution perspective. It's great, but it's still not without its challenges.
One thing that I actually like about these all-in-one sort of devices that are coming out is that when I used to put my phone in and demo people, I've had moments where they would read a text message that would come to me that maybe they shouldn't have, and it's just like, it's almost like the separation of the two is a huge factor for me.
Embarrassment in 3D, I like that. So what's your dream project like to work on? Like if you could pick any project to work on, what would it be?
Well, I think some people call it the digital mesh, some people call it the ambient environment. The idea where you're using all of these technologies to provide someone with a really rich experience. So if you have the IoT sorts of sensors and beacons, and you walk into an environment and you've got one of these devices and you can kind of go in and out of those. A friend of mine, Brent Bushnell, is launching 2-Bit Circus in LA, and it's a very multi-sensory amusement park. And things like that where you're really just taking all these technologies to provide someone with a really rich experience that is sometimes in, sometimes out, sometimes social, sometimes solo. All of those things together are kind of a dream project for me. We have the studio tour on the lot, and we're doing a lot more in Burbank on that. And then, of course, we have our Leavesden tour. So both of those are great vehicles where people are coming specially because they want to immerse themselves in those worlds, whether it's just the historical Warner Brothers world or it's the Harry Potter world. And to give technology the ability that technology gives us to actually immerse people is a really cool dream project in my mind.
Very cool.
Yeah, I guess not that different probably. I think that a dream project, is working with content that is originally constructed for that medium rather than taking something from a linear platform and trying to shove it and make it work into that. And really being able to do kind of what Chris is doing, which is, sit there in a lab environment and figure out really what works and how do we tell stories within that. Like I think Dear Angelica and some of these, the projects that Eden, what is that called?
Rose?
Yeah, Primrose is doing, like those are just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
They're beautiful and they're made for that. I think those are dream projects in my mind.
Yeah, I think for me, it's kind of continuing this quest, this kind of virtual cinema quest of figuring out just how to make these things with these new tools. And I guess in a way, I think it was probably, we used to call it like transmedia or something where
Yep.
all this stuff is happening. But I think that if we can be really conscious of how we develop our ideas and apply these kinds of technologies to those at the earliest stage, we can really do some really interesting things across all platforms simultaneously in a way that we've never ever really been able to do without a lot of effort or time or money or whatever we could throw at it. Big IP can do it over the course of the shelf life of that project, but to launch something day one and to be everywhere, and again for us to be everywhere kids are at, it's important to be really conscious of how we're developing our projects.
At Occupy, we've been working a lot with people in Korea and these simulator chairs, and with the opening of that $1 billion sort of amusement VR park in China, I think that I wouldn't say a project or like an IP, but more so just how grand those rides can be now. When you have 15 people all sitting and experiencing the same thing at the same time in the same location without having the big trail, and so you kind of create what that's going to be. I think that's a really great blank slate that I would love to work on next. Yeah,
That's awesome. I know we have a lot of developers in the audience and creators. And what advice would you give them if they want to create their own XR content?
Well, I would think about the obvious, which is when someone's consuming the content that they're going to dream up and create, that they're much more immersed in that content. They need to decide, do they give that consumer, it's really not a consumer, do they give them agency? And if so, how are they going to do that? What level of interactivity? How do they participate in the story as opposed to just passively watch it? I mean, we've seen a lot of VR where you're essentially a voyeur and you're in God mode. And that's interesting to a degree, but I think that sometimes if you're thinking about story, you might want to think about multiple paths where maybe someone could be in that voyeur mode, but then another way that they could actually immerse and have agency in that.
Yeah, I think all of that, and I think on top of that, you know, it's difficult when you're creating something for a specific platform, again, like for Six Stuff, or you're creating something for Cardboard, or you're creating something for YouTube 360. And I think just being conscious of where your audience is, who you're making this for, and making sure that you're making the best experience for where they're going to be, but also recognizing that it will potentially get distributed in these other formats. So how can you ensure that if it's received in another format that it wasn't originally meant to be in, like 360 video or whatever it might be, that you're thinking about what that versioning can be to keep audiences interested, to keep moving, and maybe even like upgrade and go to that next level.
Yeah, I would say that I'm a little biased around just kind of the real-time aspects of production, and I would say that first and foremost, understand character and learn how to be a world builder, so the things that you create are interesting and compelling. But then I would say if you're not diving deep into a game engine, you'll never survive in the coming years of content creation and distribution around entertainment, because it's all going to be coming off those platforms. Do
you prefer Unreal or Unity, or it doesn't matter?
I don't. I think they're just both the most amazing things that have ever been created.
They both love you right now.
I mean, they don't need me, because I know that they have way more passionate developers that know a lot more about those things than I do. But I can just, when I think about what they're doing and what they're capable of doing and where the future is headed, to me, it's just the foundation for content creation, period.
Wow.
I think, as a creator, speaking to other creators wanting to get into the space, what I find really interesting or a blessing is that I think that, with the emergence of this new technology, that it leveled the playing field for anybody to kind of step ahead and step up. I have a film background, and a lot of the directors that I looked up to that sort of taught me, the ways that the craft of film, they don't get it. They don't get VR, so I think that there's a 15, 20-year-old kid in a room that could maybe outdo a Spielberg, in the world. It's just all about understanding the space, understanding your audience, really doing a lot of user testing and anti-sickness, and just thinking about how we're receptive to this across the board in terms of children to grandparents, and just go for it. And I think leveling the playing field and just going after the goal and wanting to work in the space is everything.
Yeah. I'm the moderator. I can do what I want, which means that I'm going to add something. And that is hire more women, hire more diversity candidates. There's got to be a change. And it comes from producers, and it comes from hiring decision places. Hire people that don't look like you. Hire people with different backgrounds. And give them the opportunity, because right now VR is an expensive sport, and only certain people can play, and I think we should make a change. And thank you guys so much. You're all really inspiring. These guys are amazing if you see them around. Incredibly knowledgeable and committed to XR, and they got some great stories. So thank you guys so much.
Thanks.
Okay, awesome.